Job. I would say it's probably a book in the Bible. It's one of those ones that we don't really read that often. Because it's depressing. Yeah, it leaves you with more questions than answers. It leaves you wondering, who is this God? Why, right? And I felt like the Lord said, you should speak on Job. And I was like, this was last week before Sunday on Thursday. You need to speak on Job. I was like, maybe not this week. I'd like to, do some reading and research and try to digest this before we dive into it. And it was like, no, this Sunday you're starting. It's like, okay. So we've been getting into Job. So last Sunday we talked about a few things, and we're just going to run through them so we're on the right page. So the first thing we talked about is that Satan's aim is to destroy our joy in God and to replace that treasure and to replace the treasure of God with earthly treasures or wealth and our family and people in our lives. He wants to replace God with all of those things. Now, those things aren't bad things to have and enjoy, but God should always rank above them. Second thing, by redeeming a people who love him and cherish him above all earthly treasures and the pleasures we enjoy, he chooses to reflect his worth in the joy that we have in him. The third thing, God sets the limits of Satan's power to cause pain. He can't do what God doesn't let him do. Only what God says, okay, this is good that you do this because it will accomplish good purpose. God is sovereign. He does as he does because he's God. He's the creator of the universe. The next thing, Job didn't try to escape his grief. As Job is walking through these trials and the calamity and losing everything, his kids are dead, his whole family is gone, his wife has told him to just die because he's pathetic, basically is what she's saying. I'm done with this. Like, we're destitute and poor. You're sick now and dying. I'm done. You may as well just go die too. Job is in this. He didn't try to escape his grief. He didn't try to minimize what he was going through and say, I'll worship the Lord anyways. I'll praise him anyways, right? He worshiped in his grief. And that was really important to note, because when we are in our grief, don't push it aside. We need to go through that, but worship God in it. Praise him in the midst of the storm that you're in. Don't try to turn off the feelings of hurt and pain that you're going through, because God can use those in your heart to build something new and beautiful. And the last thing that we talked about is that nothing in all creation can match the weight and glory of God in our lives. No treasure, no person, no place or thing. God is our treasure. He's our hope, and he's our joy. Period. So today, we're going to talk about Job wrestling with his suffering. And he does this for months. And we are going to try to condense 30 chapters into maybe 30 minutes, which is going to be fun. So these 30 chapters are all dialogue, basically, between Job and his three friends who initially come to comfort him, but then start being mean to him. So what is this thing that we're talking about? Misery, month-long misery. And it's different than experiencing tragedy. So when you experience something bad in your life happen, like someone hurts you or someone dies or you get sick or a family member gets sick, there's this instant pain that's happening, right? You're in it right there. That is one thing. It's another thing entirely to then have to walk through the residual effects of that pain and be in that pain for a long period of time. It's the same pain, but it starts to be different. It affects how you function and think and how you wake up in the morning. It's hard. Job was doing this for months. After he got sick, after God was like, okay, you can inflict sickness on him, but you cannot take his life. And Job responds still with faith. He's not rewarded with quick healing. It doesn't go away. It just doesn't. In fact, it hangs on and hangs on and hangs on. And he has to deal with this sickness for a very long time and walk through this miserable existence for a long time, despite the fact that no matter what, he was willing to praise the Lord and acknowledge him as God. So we're going to start in Job 7, verse 2-3. Like a slave who longs for the shadow, this is what Job says, and like a hired hand who looks for his wages, so I am allotted months of emptiness and nights of misery are apportioned to me. Job is sick, he's lost everything, and this is dragging on and on. Have you ever been in that place where it's just like, Lord, when will this end? When will we see the results of us being faithful to you, of our prayers being answered, but we're not seeing that. And so he's saying all of these things. And so his misery is dragging on. So why is this happening to Job? Why, even though Job had shown faithfulness, that God was his most precious treasure, more precious than his health even, more precious than his kids and his things that he had, I would maybe suggest that the answer is that Job, and also us, have much yet to learn about suffering and who God is, because we don't understand those things. And this is what we're going to read and see in the next few chapters here. So we begin in chapter 2 verse 11. Now when Job's 3 friends heard all of this evil that had come upon him, they came each from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They made an appointment together to come to show him sympathy and comfort. Okay, this is important. We're going to go and show Job sympathy and comfort. And when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads towards heaven. And they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him. For they saw that he was suffering, and it was very great. So there's 3 cycles of conversation that start to happen after this. They've sat with Job for a little while. The next 29 chapters is this conversation. And the first cycle is his friend Eliphaz, and then Job responds. And then Bildad says something, and then Job responds. And then Zophar, and then Job responds. And then cycle 2 is the same. And then cycle 3 starts to break down. And we're going to talk about why that happens. And then later, there's Elihu. He has a speech to say, and then God speaks after that. And we're going to discuss those later, not today. So this first cycle is prompted by an outburst that Job has after they've sat for these 7 days. And it's in chapter 3. Job says this: after this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Job said, "Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived." And then jump to verse 11-13. Why did I not die at birth, come out from the womb and expire? Why did the knees receive me, or why the breast that I should nurse? For then I would have lain down and been quiet. I would have slept, then I would have been at rest. Why is light given to him who is in misery, and life to the bitter in soul, who long for death, but it comes not, and dig for it more than for hidden treasure, who rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they find the grave? Hear how he's talking? He is so miserable. He is in such despair that he's almost suicidal. He's going, I wish I'd never been born. I wish that I'd never lived the life that I lived. I wish that I'd never had kids, got married, nothing. I wish that I ceased to be. And so now his friends are going to respond to this. Eliphaz breaks in. He's the first one to go. And this is in chapter 4 and 5. And he begins spelling out a principle of theology. Do you guys know what theology means? It means to know God, knowing God. Theo, or God in Greek, right, Randy? Theos. Randy knows if you have theology questions, Randy's your guy. So he starts spelling out this principle of theology, and then his 3 friends hop on the bandwagon. The first time we see this is chapter 4, verse 7-8. He says to Job, after Job says all this stuff about wanting to die, remember who that was innocent ever perished, or where were the upright cut off, who rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they find the grave. I doubled some of my notes. Awesome. I was very confused for a second. So we see this principle start coming through. He says again, remember who that was innocent ever perished, or where were the upright cut off. As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. So he's saying, my experience, if you are being not good, you're going to receive not good things. He's saying this to Job. Imagine Job now going, what is this? You come here to comfort me, and now you're telling me that I'm a bad person. Then he continues, can mortal man be in the right before God? Can a man be pure before his maker? Even in his servants he puts no trust, and his angels he charges with error. How much more those who dwell in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust, who are crushed like the moth? And then he admits, he brings up this next thing in Job 5:17, that some suffering is actually God disciplining men. And so he says, behold, blessed is the one whom God reproves, therefore despise not the discipline of the Almighty. So he's saying, if you do good, receive good. If you do bad, you're going to get bad. But even if you're good, sometimes if you do something that God doesn't like, he's going to discipline you. You get that? This is the theological principle that he's trying to outline here. I would say it's actually kind of insensitive, first of all. Second, it's really shallow and superficial. This theology does not go very deep. And we're going to start seeing that. And then after he says these things, he says he then rebukes Job for being impatient. But now it has come to you, this calamity, and you're impatient. It touches you and you're dismayed. Is not your fear of God your confidence, and the integrity of your ways your hope? He's now rebuking a righteous man in agony for something that he wasn't doing. Yeah, just stop talking. Just stop. Then he insinuates that Job has actually not really sought God the way he should. In chapter 5, verse 8, after he says all this, then he goes, as for me, if it was me in your shoes, I would seek God, and to God I would commit my cause. He implies to Job that he would be delivered if only he would commit his way to God. For God wounds, he binds up, he shatters, but his hands heal. He will deliver you from 6 troubles, and in 7 no evil shall touch you. This is the shallow part. It's too simple to say. Just commit your life to the Lord, and he will restore your fortunes and your life and your health. And Job's probably listening to this going, what do you think I've been doing the last 7 months? Like, have you seen what I'm going through and what I'm doing? I'm worshiping the Lord. I'm giving everything to him. And you're telling me that I am an unrighteous, sinful person who God is punishing because I've done something wrong? This is where we start to have question marks, because they're saying this and we're going, but Job's innocent. Job's good. So now Job is going to protest his innocence. He's going to respond. We're in chapter 6, verse 10. This would be my comfort. I would even exult in pain unsparing, for I have not denied the words of the Holy One. And then he returns the rebuke of Eliphaz in 6, verse 24. He says, teach me and I will be silent. Make me understand how I have erred. Basically, when someone's accusing you and you know, I haven't done anything. Show me what I've done. What have I done? I don't know what I've done. I'm pretty sure I'm innocent. Show me. And if I am indeed guilty, I will respond in kind. So Job says this to Eliphaz, and then Bildad has an even harsher response to Job's profession of innocence. He says in chapter 8, verse 3-4, does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children have sinned against him, he has delivered them into the hand of their transgression. So now because Job is protesting and saying, no, I'm innocent, he's going, well, then your children are dead, so they must have been evil too. So now they're dead. and God has taken them from the earth because they sinned grievously against him. And the same goes for Job. Chapter 8, verse 11 to 13. Can papyrus grow where there is no marsh? Can reeds flourish where there is no water? While yet in flower and not cut down, they wither before any other plant. Such are the paths of all who forget God. The hope of the godless shall perish. So harsh. Can you imagine you've lost everything and you're still managing to praise God in it? And then your friends come and they begin to sympathize and comfort you. And then they start saying stuff like this. So basically what they're saying is the problem here must be that Job is not pure. He's not righteous. He has not called on God as he should. And so he's suffering for it. This is what Bildad says to Job in 8 verse 6 to 7. If you are pure and upright, surely then he will arouse himself for you and restore your rightful habitation. And though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. Now, this is what Bildad says, and Job doesn't surrender here. He's still going to say, no, I'm righteous, I'm innocent, I do not deserve what is coming here. This makes no sense. He says in chapter 9, verse 22 to 24, it is all one, therefore I say, he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When disaster brings sudden death, he mocks at the calamity of the innocent. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covers the faces of its judges. If it is not he, who then is it? Job insists that he is not guilty as charged. He is righteous. So first he argues against this idea that they're preaching at him. And now he's going to say, no, I'm innocent. 10 verse 6 to 7, that you seek out my iniquity and search for my sin, although you know that I am not guilty, and there is none to deliver out of your hand. So he says this, now Zophar speaks up. Now he's going to keep pushing this idea. And then he actually rebukes Job for claiming to be innocent in chapter 11, verse 4 to 6. For you say, my doctrine is pure, and I am clean in God's eyes. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips to you, and that he would tell you the secrets of wisdom, for he is manifold in understanding. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. Oof. Now, Job is starting to get frustrated and hurt. And when we're frustrated and hurt in the same time, we start speaking insensitively. Maybe we'll use that word. Job actually responds a little bit sarcastically here. In chapter 12, verse 3, he says, but I have understanding as well as you. I am not inferior to you. Who does not know such things as these? Basically what he's saying, he's like, duh, of course, all these things that you're saying is common knowledge. And then he continues in chapter 13, 3 to 4. He says, but I would speak to the Almighty, and I desire to argue my case with God. As for you, you whitewash with lies. Worthless physicians are you all. You came to comfort me, and now you're belittling me and telling me that I'm evil. Worthless is your friendship to me. Your maxims are proverbs of ashes, and your defenses are defenses of clay. So that's the first cycle of this conversation, and it keeps going. And the next two cycles, they really don't reveal any new arguments. It's the same argument, but they show the three friends becoming more and more harsh. You know when you're arguing with somebody and their argument really has no kind of like wall to stand on, nothing to like form a foundation so that their argument is actually good, but they are insisting that it is. And the only way for them to win the argument now, because they have no actual evidence that their argument is good and that it is right and true, they just get harsher and harsher and harsher and louder and to the point of being angry and mean. Have you ever experienced that? Have you ever done that? And then you realize how silly you were after you were proven that you weren't actually right? Yes, we've all been there. So this is how this starts to go. Eliphaz. The wicked man writhes in pain all his days through all the years that are laid up for the ruthless. And then Bildad. Indeed, the light of the wicked is put out, and the flame of his fire does not shine. And then so far, that the exalting of the wicked is short, and the joy of the godless but for a moment. So they keep going. But their theology is weak, and this is why it's getting harsher and harsher. Now, Eliphaz, he was the first one to begin this thing, and he actually started off kind of gentle, but he had a rebuke in there, but he was trying to be nice. But now he's going to attack Job with brutality. In chapter 22, verse 5 to 11, he says, "Is not your evil abundant? There is no end to your iniquities. For you have exacted pledges of your brothers for nothing and stripped the naked of their clothing. You have given no water to the weary to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. The man with power possessed the land, and the favored man lived in it. You have sent widows away empty, and the arms of the fatherless were crushed. Therefore snares are all around you, and sudden terror overwhelms you, or darkness so that you cannot see, and a flood of water covers you." Now, we have to understand that these are not facts. This is Eliphaz getting caught up in the emotion, and he's actually starting to manufacture truths. So he's starting to produce information which isn't true because he wants to be proved right. And he's willing here to belittle Job to an extreme sense. Now, the problem here is that this is all coming from an inadequate theology of suffering and of God to deal with reality. They don't understand what is going on, and they must prove this wrong theology so that in their minds, in their human way of thinking, they can reconcile who God is and what they believe of him with the reality that they're seeing. Because if they don't prove that, they're lost. They have questions and questions and more questions because they don't understand why an innocent man like Job would lose everything and be experiencing this if he hadn't done something evil. They don't understand, and they can't understand, and so they have to prove their point. This is where their theology is breaking down. Bildad makes his last speech in chapter 25. And we start to see how shallow their theology is because he can only manage 6 short verses about the general sinfulness of man. We're not going to go there because there's so much to get into. He can only do 6 verses, 6 lines. That's all he has to say. And then Zophar tries to speak, but he actually can't. He has nothing left to say. He can't. What they said. Right? He's caught. He can't go any farther. Their theology can't sustain itself. 1, when you find yourself in that place, in an argument, and you have nothing left to say, either you are dead wrong, or you have not spent enough time reading this, because the truths that you are speaking, which can be truth in and of themselves, have not been applied to the situation according to truth, if that makes sense. So their simple principle of justice, it hasn't been able to stand. It's been breaking down, and they've been meaner and meaner and meaner to try to prove it. Job is a good man, yet he suffers far worse than any of the wicked people that they know. And this correlation of wickedness and suffering in this world, it just does not hold up. They can't get it. So through this whole conversation, there are parts where Job talks about dying. And we see Job's feelings in here. We're not just seeing his friends belittle him and his responses and trying to claim his innocence. We start actually seeing Job's feelings and how he's actually doing mentally. And he begins in chapter 3 with utter dismay. He cries out against the wisdom of God in giving him birth and in bringing him alive. And then the duration of the disease had almost defeated the initial stand of faith that he took early on after he lost it all. You know, he loses everything and he still says, God gives and he takes away. It's all good. God is God. And then little by little, you watch his faith regaining strength as he fights this theology of his friends. So first he's like, God is good. God is God. Then he's like, nope, I wish to just die. I wish there to be nothing after I die. Just end it all. No life after death. No God. No nothing. I just want to cease to be because I'm so miserable. And he gradually starts to come back from there. Because his friends. Now, this is the interesting part. God actually is using his friends' bad theology and how mean they're being to actually bring Job back from this place of denying that God exists. He's using the ridiculousness of what they're saying to bring him back to a place of going, what am I doing? I'm sounding like them. And they're crazy right now. I don't believe that. There's a truth that's greater than this. And so we can start to see God working through, even as we're sitting here going, wow, that's harsh. God's using that. Remember, we talked about how everything Satan does is allowed by God because he sees fit and that it would be good to do that. Something good is going to come of this. And as his friends are tearing him down, his faith in God is being built back up because of it. So, at first in chapter 7, his response to Eliphaz, he's sure that death is the end of everything. There's nothing left. And then in chapter 10, his response to Bildad, he's still sunk in this despair about death. And then we get to chapter 14, in his response to Zophar, and Job, again, he faces the certainty of his death. He's like, yeah, I want to die. I'm probably going to die. And he cries out to be released to die. But this time he asks a question in verse 14. He says, I want to die, but then if a man dies, shall he live again? All the days of my service, I would wait till my renewal should come. If there is a God and life after death, I would wait for that. In his second response to Eliphaz in chapter 17, he has a reference to Sheol, hell. But it's one of rather a question rather than despair. He goes, if I hope for Sheol as my house, like if I hope to die, and I make my bed in darkness, if I say to the pit, you are my father, and to the worm, my mother or my sister, where then is my hope? If I do this, where's my hope? If I die, if I just take my life, if I cease to be, where's my hope? Who will see my hope? Will it go down to the bars of Sheol? Will I still have hope there? Or shall we descend together into the dust? So Job is now questioning the realities of things. And then in chapter 19, he reaches an answer. He says, for I know that my Redeemer lives, and at last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. My heart faints within me. Job has finally gotten to this place where he's sure that he will meet God, and he will be God as a redeemer, not an angry judge. Now, here's the thing. This confidence doesn't answer Job's questions. It doesn't solve the theological problem of why is this happening to me. It doesn't really change anything. He's still utterly perplexed as to why he should have to suffer as he does. Why is this happening? And his suffering goes on and on and on. And God seems utterly arbitrary in the way that he's parceling out this suffering and comfort in life. He can't understand this. But his faith has returned, and so he silences his friends. His faith enables him to hold fast to three of his cherished convictions. The first is that God is sovereign and that he is powerful. And there is goodness and justice in God's character, and God is faithful to his creations. So now he silences his friends. The first thing he does is he magnifies this mysterious sovereign power of God. In chapter 26, he says, behold, these are but the outskirts of his ways. And how small a whisper do we hear of him? But the thunder of his power, who can understand? And then he magnifies the unsearchable wisdom of God. You know how his friends are going like, if only God would tell you his wisdom, right? Chapter 28, he says, but where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Man does not know its worth, and it is not found in the land of the living. And then he affirms relentlessly his own integrity. After he says, no, God is this, and we hardly understand him. And not only that, I have been walking in integrity. I hold fast to my righteousness and will not let it go. My heart does not reproach me for any of my days. whatever you can say, you will not change the reality that I walked with integrity. And I will rest my hope in God and know that he must have a plan and that there must be a purpose here because I am innocent. So when we've gone through all of this conversation, congratulations, we've made it through 29 chapters. You can go back. I would encourage you, as we do this stuff, go back and read. Read from Job 3 to 31 before next week. You should be able to do that. I'm serious. You should. There's no problem. Yeah, you're laughing at me, Leon. Come on. You have an audio Bible. Okay, so I want to go through 5 things we can learn about this whole conversation that took place. As much as we're still left with these questions about suffering and God and why it happens and what God is thinking when he allows these things to happen, there are some things to be learned here. The first one is that true theological statements can be false. True theological statements can be false. If you take most of the statements of Job's friends and you separate them from all of the context of what they're talking about, and you just put them on a paper by itself, it's true. Like they're speaking right theology by itself. But their application is wrong. Proverbs 26, verse 9. I'm going to read it a couple times because sometimes Proverbs, the wording is poetry, and you have to kind of think on it a second. It says, like a thorn that goes up into the hand of a drunkard is a proverb in the mouth of fools. Like a thorn that goes up into the hand of a drunkard is a proverb in the mouth of fools. Basically, if you do not use the theology that you know in a right way, you're just going to hurt someone. You're not going to end up using it to further the kingdom. You're going to actually tear down this person's belief structure, and you're going to push them away from what you desire to draw them into. And so it is of the utmost importance that we have good theology, but not only that, but that we apply it right so that it's not destructive. There is truth, and God will show it to us. But when we share it, we must let his love and the truth of what happened on the cross be the guide for how we share it. If we don't do that, all we do is hurt people. How many of you have friends that have left their faith, have stopped going to church because someone said something maybe true to them, but it was said without the love of Christ and in a framework that just was hurtful? That's not how Jesus spoke. Jesus spoke harsh truth, but he did so in love. So that you had this overwhelming emotion of like, I hate what they just said, but for some reason I'm feeling the love from it, but I don't like it. And you're trying to reconcile these two emotions at the same time. If you have one without the other, it's not good. So Job's friends here, they're speaking things that could be true, but they're phrasing them badly. And so it's not good theology. Second thing, suffering and prosperity are not distributed in the world in proportion to the evil or good that a person does. Basically, if you're good, no guarantee that you will have prosperity. If you're bad, no guarantee that you are going to receive your dues in this world. Job is right when he says they're all one. The wicked are spared in the day of calamity, but the just and blameless man is a laughingstock. The lesson: we shouldn't judge each other as wicked or blameless. We shouldn't do that when we don't know the heart of the Lord or the heart of that person. Right? People do things. We all do things when we're caught up in the moment, whether they're good things or bad things. And we have to make sure that we don't judge each other based on that one moment in time, because that one thing might actually not be a reflection of the heart that is inside of that person. And we have no idea what God is trying to do in that situation. And so we should not judge how or what or why this person is experiencing or doing what they're doing, which is what Job's friends are doing. They're going, well, calamity has happened. He must be evil. right? We shouldn't do that. Like, somebody in here gets in a car accident, spouse is dead. Well, they must have done something grievous in the eyes of God. That's just bad theology, not good. Yes. I won't repeat it because it's going online, but yes. Those who suffer may be the best of us, and those who prosper may be the worst among us. That's just a truth. And it just leaves you with question marks, but it is. The third thing, nevertheless, God still reigns over all the affairs of men, from the greatest to the smallest. God is still in control. He's still sovereign. He's still God. We just don't understand. If we don't understand this mystery of suffering as humans, one of the things that we do to try to solve this riddle that we can't solve because we're not God is that we actually subconsciously limit God's control over things. We say God must not have been in control. We don't say that consciously because we can't say that consciously because that goes against everything we believe, but subconsciously we say that in our minds to kind of reconcile how we're feeling. We can't reconcile the clash of a righteous person suffering. We can't. It just doesn't make sense to us. And so we limit what God is doing and what he's doing. He couldn't have willed that sickness. There's no way it was God's will that that person die. Right? I'm sure we've all been going, man, how? What? The death of that child. How could that be God? So he must not be in control. He's a limited God. Remember, we don't say that. I'm not saying that we say that. What I'm saying is that our actions reflect that we are subconsciously thinking that. Job and his friends have this common ground, though. God reigns. There's no solution to the problem of suffering that questions God's sovereignty will ever satisfy our hearts. This is the one thing they all agree on. No matter how much they're clashing, their common ground is that God reigns, and there's no solution to the problem of suffering and the questions that come if we question God's sovereignty that will satisfy us. Just won't. Job 12, verse 13 to 16 says, "With God are wisdom and might. He has counsel and understanding. If he tears down, none can rebuild. And if he shuts a man in, none can open. If he withholds the waters, they dry up. If he sends them out, they overwhelm the land. With him are strength and sound wisdom. The deceived and the deceiver are his." So God is in control. The fourth thing, there is wisdom behind the arbitrariness of the world as we see it, but it is hidden from man. There's wisdom there, but we are not permitted to see it. You know, Paul says we prophesy in part and we know in part, right? That's just the reality. But soon we will know. When we go to heaven, we will see all. We will understand it. But right now, we won't. We just won't. And there's nothing we can learn, read, experience, say, or do that will give us understanding. And so why are we trying to seek it? We have to be okay with the question marks. We're not meant to know the answers. Job 28, 12 to 13 says, "But where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Man does not know its worth, and it is not found in the land of the living." God understands the way to it, and he knows its place. Basically saying, you can search, you will not find. Only God knows and knows its place. These truths can be confirmed in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 12. "For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known." Faith, no matter what, affirms that however chaotic and absurd things may seem, how much we might want to question what is going on in our lives or our friends' lives or someone we know, no matter how much we're going, why? Why, Lord? I don't understand what you're doing. It makes no sense. This person is hurting. They've lost everything. Why is this happening? I can't reconcile this with how I believe you to be a good, loving father. It makes no sense to me. Because in one hand you're giving and the other you're taking away. I don't get it. Our faith, if you take the Bible as a whole, as we should, and our faith as a whole, and we make it what it is, complex with all many different moving parts and things that you can't just read one verse and go, yes, that's the truth, because you need the beginning and the end and the things that go before and after it to fully understand. If we take the whole truth of our faith and what we believe, that faith will always affirm that no matter how chaotic things are and how limited we can see, the things that are happening are tactics of infinite wisdom. When we go back to chapter 1 and 2, where we see the interactions between Satan and God, and the heavenlies are watching this thing, this showdown happen, where God is saying, look at Job, he's amazing. He loves me. I'm the most important thing in his life. And Satan's like, yeah, if you do this, then he won't like you. So God's like, okay, go ahead. He's proving that Job's ultimate value is in God. And we start to see that this is more than just a contest for God. It's not God just using Job willy-nilly. He's using Job with infinite wisdom that goes beyond anything Satan can even see to say, I am the Alpha, the Omega. I am the only thing that matters to my people because I have proved myself to them. And they know that that is the truth. The last thing, no matter what we go through, no matter what we experience in life, this is what I want us to think about today. Hold fast to God. Hold fast to Him. Because no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're witnessing people go through, no matter how many question marks flood your mind of like, why is this happening? They've served and served and served and served, and now they're dying and they're sick. Or they're a wonderful person and now they're gone. Why, Lord? No matter what, if you hold on to God, if you hold fast to Him, you will be able to look back. And you will see circumstances and things surrounding that event that will make you go, maybe, just maybe, that was because this, and I needed this, and that family needed this, and this, and this. There's a man in Fernie who passed away when I was pastoring the church there. And everybody felt like, the Lord was going to heal him. There was just this kind of like, something good and amazing is about to happen. And then he died. Now, it was all these question marks, again, coming in. His family was very unhealthy. His wife was always sick. His son was far away from knowing who God was. Chain smoking, just not good. His family's a mess. This man dies. And the Lord spoke to his wife and was like, you have been idolizing your husband in a place where only I was supposed to be. And now she is serving the Lord. She's healthy. His son, because his dad cared so much, was trying to make sure that he had what he needed and was good for him, doesn't have that anymore. And the neighbor has been a father figure to him, and he's actually starting to become healthy and be like not a degenerate person in society. And you look at this and you're going, we thought he was going to heal him so that his family would see this miracle and come to God. But the reality was that we couldn't understand was that God actually needed to take this person home to be in heaven so that they wouldn't have the idol and the crutch that had been in their lives to prevent them from actually living a life with the Lord in the first place. They were putting him in the place God was supposed to be. and now they are thriving. Yes, they miss him, and they're still hurt there, and they're grieving, but they're thriving. They're living what the life they were supposed to be living all along. And the sad part of that is that it took God taking this person away for good for them to get there. So powerful. So when we read things like Job, and when we experience things like what he went through, calamity and suffering for no reason, we have to understand that when we hold fast to God, we will eventually see something. It might not be a sure that's why it happened, but it will probably leave you going, there was a purpose there, and I'm starting to see the ripple effect. I don't know exactly why, and it might take decades and decades to fully know why. But I think this is why this happened. Because God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that that needed to happen. And so he let Satan do it. And Satan's sitting there giggling to himself because he did something and got away with it, and then good things start to happen. Imagine, the toddler that thinks he's gotten away with something, and then the parents come along and go, why'd you take the cookie from the cookie jar? What? No, I didn't. Have you guys seen that video of the two little boys? They're like covered in paint in the bathtub. They're sitting there and they're just head to toe. They look like little raccoons because their eyes are like the only thing on their bodies that's not covered in paint. And the dad is like, so who did it? And they're both like, because he's like, did you do it? Mm-hmm. You? Mm-hmm. And he's like, who did it? And then the big brother goes like this to the little brother. And the dad, he actually starts to chuckle, and he's trying to contain himself because his two boys, they look utterly ridiculous. They're in the bathtub, so it's no big deal. So you can wash it all and it's good. And he's laughing because they're trying to blame each other. And the little boy, he's got no idea what's going on. His big brother's trying to frame him. He's going like this, and his brother's going like this. And the dad's chuckling. And then the big brother's like, what's funny, Diddy? And that makes the dad laugh even more. And he's like, nothing. What's funny? Nothing. You've been bad. We don't understand. I don't even know why that story popped into my head. What was I talking about? I don't know. It's funny. We're going to worship together. We're going to worship God because he is sovereign. He is so good. As we worship, try to think about how you're going to